Namaskar and a very pleasant good afternoon to all of you. Distinguished speakers of today's DELNET Book Talk program, Shri Jayakumar, the author of the book Simple Life, an inquiry into the joys of simplicity in a complex world. The experienced panel of book discussants, including Reverend Dobum Tulku, Professor Balaganpati Devrakonda, Dr. Anand Kumar, Mrs. Sanjula Sharma, the online attendees, including Dr. S.S. Murthy, Vice President DELNET, Dr. P.R. Goswami, Treasurer DELNET, the other GB and RSC members of DELNET, Mr. Sanjay Arya, CEO, Shubhi Publications, the publisher of the book, eminent librarians, library and information science professionals, writers, poets, academicians, administrators, faculty, researchers and scholars, DELNET officials at Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune units, ladies and gentlemen. I, Sangeeta Kaul, on behalf of DELNET, extends a very warm, hearty welcome to each one of you to today's program on DELNET Book Talk on Simple Life, an inquiry into the joys of simplicity in a complex world, authored by Shri Jayakumar and published by Shubhi Publications in 2021. I'm glad to inform you all that DELNET has initiated a new book talk series wherein we will be discussing from time to time the recently published book titles of all genres, and we welcome you today to its first program, the inaugural session of this book talk series. We are pretty confident that these book talk series programs will immensely help in promoting the book reading habits among the professionals and would also encourage and enhance the knowledge sharing activities through this online platform. I would also like to take this opportunity to request you all, if you may kindly desire DELNET to conduct book talks or any specific book titles that you may like to recommend for this book talk series, we shall be very much glad to explore the possibilities of holding the programs collaboratively. So on behalf of DELNET, I would like to take an immense pleasure in welcoming the author, Shri Jayakumar, and all our distinguished panel of discussants who are there with us and taking out time on being there with us this afternoon. I have immense pleasure, firstly, in introducing you all to the author, Shri Jayakumar, who is a well-known poet, lyricist, translator, author, and painter. Shri Jayakumar has a profound contributions of serving Indian administrative service for nearly 4 decades. He served as a Chief Secretary to Government of Kerala and as Joint Secretary, Ministry of Culture, Government of India. He also served as a founding Vice Chancellor of the Malayalam University and currently serves as the Director of IIMG in Thiruvananthapuram. He has authored more than 45 books. He has also received various awards and recognitions for his outstanding contributions in the field of poetry and public service. Professor Jayakumar also serves as a president of DELNET and also as a of the Poetry Society India. I have immense pleasure, sir, in welcoming you on behalf of DELNET to this online platform, and thank you very much for giving to the world a wonderful title that we are going to deliberate in yet another few minutes' time. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much indeed. I have immense pleasure in welcoming Reverend Dobum Tulku. Thank you, sir. Firstly, would like to thank you on behalf of DELNET and on behalf of each of us to be there for gracing this occasion as our distinguished discussant of the book today. And sir is very kind to come. He stays in Gurgaon, nearby to Delhi, and he's been very kind to have accepted our request to be there. He's there with us at DELNET. So we look forward to the normal times wherein we can have all of you here in attending the sessions in the physical form, broadcasting it through the online. And we are indeed happy that one of our panelists, our distinguished panelist, Dobum Tulku, is there in the DELNET office itself and being there with us, gracing this occasion. I have pleasure in introducing you all to Reverend Dobum Tulku, who was born in the Kham region of Tibet in 1941 and recognized as the reincarnation of the previous Dobum Tulku at the age of 2 by Persho Jamba Rinpoche. At the age of 12, he joined Drubang Monastery in the central Tibet and studied Buddhist philosophy. He came to India in 1959 and lived in a monastic camp in the West Bengal to continue his studies. At the Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies, then under the auspices of Sanskrit University, Varanasi, he studied Buddhist philosophy and received Geshe Acharya degree in 1972. He was awarded an honorary doctorate degree in Buddhist studies by the Buddhist University of Bangkok in 1999. From 1972 until March 2011, he worked in various academic, cultural, and administrative institutions of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He also served as a former director of Tibet House at New Delhi. Uh, Reverend Dubung Tulku pursued a Millennium Project of the World Festival of Sacred Music, which became a worldwide event with the festival at over a dozen venues in different continents. He also contributed to the Human Unity, which is the Dalai Lama's dream for the century. Dubung Tulku is currently engaged in interreligious and cross-cultural activities through art and culture as the founding managing trustee of the World Buddhist Cultural Trust. He is an author, editor, compiler of books, both in English and in Tibetan, and co-authored several academic works. On behalf of DELNET, sir, we welcome you today to this platform, and thank you very much for being there with us at this program. We have yet another very person of great eminence who has immensely contributed to the field of philosophy. No one else other than Professor Balaganapati Devrakondaji, who is presently the professor of philosophy at the University of Delhi. Firstly, would like to welcome you and thank you so much for agreeing to our request at a very short notice. And it's always a great pleasure to have you with us in the DELNET program. So once again, we would like to thank you. Professor Devrakonda's research interests are in the areas of Indian philosophy, philosophy of religion, social and political philosophy, and philosophical practice. In addition to teaching and research, Professor Bala is a certified philosophical counselor by the American Philosophy Practitioners Association, New York. His publications includes Philosophical Doctrines of Andhakas, Exploring Early Buddhist Sects of Andhra, published by Springer in 2020, Shifts in the Classical Indian Conception of Philosophical Practice in 2021, Global Lockdown Calendar 2020, Revisiting Dana, a response to Eurocentric approaches in 2020. It's so commendable to see during the entire lockdown period of pandemic, he has more than 4 books to his credit, which is unparalleled. You know, it's hard to see a scholar that shows that how well you have been utilizing this entire lockdown period. And this also reminds me to share that even Jayakumar sir has spent this entire book during the lockdown period. And we do have our, also Professor Bala, we could see that 4 titles that you have your, it's more an inspirational story for the scholarly community to see that how during the challenging times you're keeping yourself focused and have come out with these publications which have been published by the publishers of Great Reputation. Professor Bala is a project fellow. Professor Bala is a project fellow of the project Great Transition in India, Korean Perspective of Indian Studies, being conducted by the Institute of Indian Studies at Hankook University of Foreign Studies in South Korea. He's also working on a project titled Yoga Consciousness in Mahabharata, the ethical value of societal and political well-being. Spark 2019 to 2021 and has also completed a major funding research project of ICSSR, Culture Through the Labyrinth of Globalization, a study of popular imaginations and alternative narratives of digital and non-digital Telugu literature. Indeed, we are much impressed with his great contributions. He's also serving as a regional coordinator of Council for Research in Values and Philosophy at Washington, D.C., and a chief advisor for Center for Ethics and Values in Ramanujan College. Professor Balaganpati is a guest edited the special issue on Indian perspectives on philosophical counseling for the Journal of APA and has also served as an editor-in-chief of International Journal of Applied Ethics and has numerous other credits to his, has a number of other assignments that he has to his credit. He has also served as the chairman of the governing body of Maitri College in New Delhi, a member of the governing body of Bhagini Nivedita College, New Delhi for the year 2021, and has also been a member of the review committee of Indian Council of Philosophical Research constituted by MHRD, Government of India. It's a proud privilege for us, Professor Bala, to have you with us today. And once again, we thank you for being there with us. Thank you. We have another distinguished speaker we would like to acknowledge his presence with us, Dr. Anand Kumarji. Firstly, sir, thank you very much for joining us and for agreeing to be one of our distinguished panelists for this program. Dr. Anand Kumarji has been the head at the Department of Reproductive Allergy at All India Institute of Medical Sciences in Delhi for more than 17 years. He has done his MD from Banaras Hindu University and a postdoctorate from Hamburg University. He has been a fellow of the National Academy of Medical Sciences, and he has been decorated with several oration awards. Also, he has written a medical bestseller textbook published by Springer. He is a poet, a fiction writer, and now lives at Auroville in Pondicherry. He's also currently translating Jayasi's Padmavat into English. We are indeed happy and pleased to have you with us, Dr. Anand Kumarji, and thank you very much for sparing your time and being there with us. Thank you very much. We have with us a very fine human being who is being blessed with a number of qualities besides being, I'm talking of Mrs. Sanjula Sharmaji. Besides being a poet, she is also a journalist who is based in Delhi. She grew up in the beautiful hills of Darjeeling and went to do her master's in English literature from Jadavpur University. Mrs. Sanjula has written extensively for national dailies, journals, and magazines, both in India and in Kuwait. She was a scriptwriter for ZTV. She also worked as a consultant editor for All India Institute of Management Association for many years, and then quit journalism to focus on a literary career. Mrs. Sanjula has published 5 books of poetry and 2 anthologies of short stories. Her recent book of poems, A Fistful of Sky, has a wide spectrum of themes. Another new book, Once Upon a Page, is a collection of short stories based in Kuwait and India and has been released on Kindle also. She's a founder of Happy Minds, a creative platform through which she conducts creative writing workshops for children, as well as on the online poetry events. Mrs. Sanjula is also a volunteer with Tamanna, a school for children with special needs. So it's indeed so wonderful to see that how Mrs. Sanjula, besides being a poet, a journalist, a writer, also contributing to the society by being associated very closely and doing a very pioneering work with the associations like Tamanna, with the Happy Minds that she herself has conceptualized this entire thing. We are indeed very happy to have you with us, Sanjula ji, and thank you so very much for agreeing to our request to be there today with us. It's a pleasure, proud privilege and pleasure for me now to request Shri K. Jayakumar ji, sir, also holds as a president of the DELNET, and it is a proud moment for me also to announce that this is the very first inaugural program that we are doing it under the book talk series. So, and we are so indeed happy, and we are going to cherish this forever, that we have started off this book talk series with the book that you have gifted to the entire world, and everyone really look forward to hearing from you. May I have a pleasure, sir, in requesting you to kindly give that's from the author about this book, that everyone is eagerly looking forward to hear, A Simple Life. So may I request you, sir, to kindly start, the deliberations of the day today. Over to you, sir.
Overdose of nice words. I'm happy that DELNET is embarking on a new program, this DELNET Book Talk series. I'm happy to be associated with DELNET as its president. It's a privilege because DELNET is doing a wonderful job in these times of crisis. We are actually bridging the information gap which has been created by the pandemic. And I'm happy that I could be associated with DELNET in these very crucial times. And when we had lost Dr. Kaul and Dr. Sangeeta has taken over, and this book talk series is a new activity that we have very appropriately incorporated into the overall working of DELNET. So I'm happy to be chosen as the first author whose book would be discussed in this first ever discussion under the DELNET book talk series. And I hope and I pray that in the subsequent events, mightier people, mightier authors, greater authors may bless this forum with their works. And I'm sure the large number of members that we have and who have very kindly enrolled and are attending this program. They are giving us the inner strength to continue with these very significant activities of DELNET. But for their interest, our interest would have waned. So they don't allow us to sort of rest on the oars. Our member libraries, members, librarians, they are all the inspiration for DELNET to go on this path. So I'm happy that the book talk series will be a great hit, and I'm happy that my book has been chosen as the first one. Okay, now within the 15 minutes allotted to me, I should try to condense what I have to say as an author. Authors are dangerous people because having written a book, they have to reproduce the whole book to everybody that they meet. That is why they become lonely people, because people shun them most of the time, because you are going to an author, your evening is gone. The fellow will now wax eloquently on what he has written. So this is a problem with any author. So I'm trying to believe that I'm not the author. I have read this book and I'm trying to share with you, because if I think I'm the author, I'll be forced to tempted to talk more. Okay. Now I'm actually overwhelmed by these very highly high intellectual panelists. I feel unequal to them when I see the very imposing panelists before me, and I should compliment as well as blame Sangeeta for putting me in this very unstable position. Therefore, very unusually, I feel rather not shy, but I feel overwhelmed. But at the same time, I feel extremely grateful that you had accepted this invitation, read this book, and thought it appropriate to grace this occasion by your presence. I am extremely blessed, and I hope that we will be able to do we will be able to present the book to the readers in its dimensions. Anyway, I don't want to talk about this book at length. I will only try to condense my argument by saying that what is the hypothesis of this book? The hypothesis of this book is that it has a very simple argument. The book starts from the premise that life today is getting very complex. That is the premise. I started writing it in 2020, April or May. By March, we had the lockdown, and then your mind starts working. By May, I started writing it. I think by December, the book was, by November, the book was. So first time, actually, I wrote it in Malayalam, my mother tongue. Then I translated myself into English. Of course, it is not exact translation. It's a kind of rework on English. So the premise is that life is today, life as we have been living is very complex today. And it is getting increasingly complex because there are forces at work which has a stake in this complexity. Because the more complex our lives become, then I think there are a lot of vested interests in seeing that your life gets more and more complicated. It gets more and more addicted to external objects. It is able to lure you with external objects so that which they promise will make you happy. And once you reach that point of happiness, you understand this was not the happiness I was seeking. So like the proverbial deer in the desert or wherever, it again goes further. Finally, it finds out there is nothing. The very famous story of Tolstoy about the farmer going for the 6 feet of land, for a huge stretch of land, finally has to be contented with the 6 feet, which is sufficient to bury him. So we are also like that. Man is actually chasing something to make himself very happy. At the end of the day, he becomes unhappy because of the very pursuit of happiness. That is a paradox of modern life. His pursuit of happiness is the cause of his unhappiness. Only thing is, we recognize this towards the end of your life, where you are not in a position to articulate properly, nor do you have sufficient time to correct your course, because it is too late. The entire life journey is wasted in such misplaced ideas about happiness, in these misplaced priorities of life. And there are the whole lot of economic and political architecture which hold you captive so that you keep on going your supermarkets, consume more and more, waste more and more, pollute more and more, make your life and the life of everybody living on this planet as complicated as possible. WCC panel has, World Environmental Panel has a few days ago again alerted that the way we are heading, it is into disaster, no doubt about it, unless we change our lifestyle. You see, here, great world leaders sitting in the United Nations talking about climate change. I don't think it is going to translate into action which is going to reverse the trend of climate change and disaster. Unless change happens in every human being, in the mind of every human being, I think the ecological disaster that is awaiting us cannot be averted by any kind of Paris declaration or whichever declaration you may make. While it boils down, it trickles down into small half-hearted activities which are prevented by all kinds of economic interests to see that it is diluted. Anyway, that game of chess goes on. If the world has to change, we have to change. An individual has to change. An individual has to say yes to certain things, no to certain things. Anyway, so the whole premise of the book is that life journey has to be essentially a journey from complexity to simplicity. It is not only for your own welfare, but for the welfare of whole humanity and for planet Earth. And this complexity is not a good thing because it has a lot of collateral damage. As I said, environmental damage, spiritual damage, your physical damage, your health damage. Complexity is not a very rewarding experience. Although we are caught in the web of complexity, complexity ultimately is a losing game. So our destination is simplicity. The book is all about destination simplicity, but it is easier said than done. Destination simplicity is easier said than done because we live in a complex world. We are fed with inputs which will make our lives complex, which will make our minds complex, which will make our activities complex, which will make your houses complex. Our homes are very complex spaces, except for the very, very beautifully furnished front room where visitors are allowed. Now, of course, no visitors in COVID times, but that's a beautiful space. Your wife or housekeeper or whoever keeps it very immaculately, but your bedroom wardrobe is in a bad shape. Your table drawers are in bad shape. You have cluttered it with all kinds of things. Actually, the spur of this book, or why I was inspired to write this book, is by reading a book by Mary Kondo. I have acknowledged this book. This is about decluttering life. She's talking about decluttering, not life. She doesn't talk in such philosophical terms, but she says, how can you declutter your physical environment? In that book goes at length. I have quoted from her and acknowledged my indebtedness to her. But from there, I took on from the physical decluttering to mental decluttering. That is where I have sort of used her as a launch pad. Now, our physical clutter is a manifestation of your inner clutter. If you are internally very peaceful, internally uncluttered, your external environment will be uncluttered. Simple, no doubt about it. Like the Japanese houses, like the Japanese garden. The life itself is decluttered, like the ashrams of monks, of our ancient ashrams for that matter. The ashrams that the great Indian tradition has, they are not complex places. It is only the new 5-star ashrams which are very complex. Great sages like Kashyapa or like great sages like Vishwamitra or Vasishtha or other rishis, they lived in very simple thatched houses. That is enough because their greatness doesn't come from the externalia. Whereas in Kerala, for example, where we used to get a lot of money from the Gulf countries, we have houses which measure around 10,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet for 2 people to live. Her son is in the Gulf, so a lot of money comes, 10,000, 15,000 square feet, no use. Finally, the house goes into disrepair, and then finally he is exiled from the Gulf countries, no money to pay the electrical bills, and finally the house is disposed of as a hospital or something. This also happens, Whole life goes in the pursuit of cluttering your lives. Okay, I don't have much time. So this book, in these various chapters, develops this philosophy or this idea as to what makes our life complex. But why are we afraid of being simple? Because the external life gives you certain examples. Look, so and so lives like that. He has so many cars. He has so many these things. So everybody is, regardless of his income and his capability, is trying to emulate and wants to convey the symptoms of being a very affluent person without having the wherewithal to do it. Finally, in Kerala, for example, the suicide rate is very high because we are a very consumerist people. We keep on borrowing money and spend in consumer durables and consumables. Finally, a day of reckoning comes and you have no wherewithal to pay it and you commit suicide. Suicide rate is very high because it's a price we pay for the cluttering in our lives. So this book actually talks about why are we afraid of simplicity. And simplicity is not simple. That is my main argument. I can write a book, but to live the way I have written the book is quite difficult. It is not simple because human mind is the villain of the piece. So there is a chapter called the mind, the lord of destiny. Actually, nothing will happen in this world unless your mind is with you. We can keep on pretending to others that I am a very great man, I am a very simple person, I am a compassionate person. Unless your mind is with you, these are all hollow words. Mind, what is the problem with the mind? The problem with the mind is that mind works on different levels, and at the egoistic level, most of the time it is in the ego framework. Mind wants to make you feel very important. Actually, I have borrowed extensively from Eckhart Tolle's book on this, particularly the book Newer, where he talks. The whole book is about ego. It's a wonderful book. So mind always wants to make you feel very important. I have this Mercedes Benz parked in front of my car, of course 90% loan, 10% hand borrowing from somebody else. Nothing is mine, but there is a car parked in front of the vehicle. My neighbors are going to be very envious. The earlier ad of Onida TV is very symptomatic. Owner's pride, neighbors envy. Actually, we are wasting our life only to make the neighbor envious. Finally, he'll sympathize with you when you die because you have died as a pauper anyway. So neighbor's pride, owner's pride and neighbor's envy is a very philosophically or rather psychologically, social psychologically very cryptic advertisement message that happens every time. So mind doesn't permit you to become simple because we get attached to these external objects to define yourself. Who are you? Are you the one with the Mercedes Benz or some other vehicle? Are you the one who is building this huge house? Oh, wonderful. Are you the one occupying this exalted position? Are you the one who is the husband of this wonderful nymph walking with you? All kinds of things, whereby your ego gets excited. Yes, yes, yes. My son topped the rank, the examination, CAT or whatever it is. My son topped the rank. He's the rank holder. It is my son. This not the son is not important. It is my son that is important because I have to get bloated. This ego is working in every simple and complex situations of life. When you're overtaking a vehicle, and if that vehicle is a small vehicle, if he has overtaken your new car, you become agitated because look at this small little puny vehicle. I have spent 20 lakhs on this vehicle, and this Maruti 800 is overtaking me, so I have to overtake him. Road rage. Everything is this brittle ego. Ego is a very foolish fellow. Also, he gets excited very fast, deflated very fast. You disengage with the ego, then only you can achieve simplicity, because after all, the worth of life is not in its external objects, but in what you really are. So I'll come to the next part, or the last part. Although the books talk about all the physical environment, about cluttering and all that, ultimately it is about your mind, it is about your existence. How do we declutter our mind from these kama, krodha, lobha, moha, and all these negative emotions, which make us smaller people, there are these twin tendencies in us. One, we can become very, very noble people by our thoughts and actions. We can also become very, very self-centered and very petty fellows. So we oscillate. Some people do not oscillate because they walk the walk of pettiness. They the route of pettiness. But people who are aware of the alternative gets oscillated between these two. So long as it doesn't hurt your ego, we are very generous. So I say that life is all about crossing this point. You have to tame the mind, and from the physical level, simplicity moves on into the philosophical and ethical dimensions. Actually, when do we become complex or cluttered? When do we clutter ourselves? The moment we are not grateful to life, we clutter. You don't trust life. You are not grateful to life. Life has given us everything in abundance, but still we are very, very petty. That means we are being ungrateful to the great bounteous nature which has given us everything. The moment you forget this kind of bounty, the moment we become ungrateful, we lead a very silly, complex lives. So the trick is to awaken to the glory of nature, the abundance of nature, and be as abundant as possible in your mind. Then the call of the ego goes away. Life becomes simpler. Life becomes less cluttered. Your attachment to external objects your attachment to petty feelings, petty ideas all go away, and you become part of this wonderful, wonderful world full of things. Abundant. Nature has given you in bounty. So this bounty, you become inheritant, you inherit that. So I will just read the last paragraph of the book and be done with it. Because I can go on, as I said, an author is a menace. An author is a menace to be in his company is a menace. So I'll just read the last sentence. After quoting Einstein, who talks about mystery, he talks mystery is all about, is the most beautiful thing. Anyway, then I say that there is no other walkway to the treasure house of inner peace and silence. Actually, the complexity in life, cluttering in life takes away, exiles us from the inner house of peace and silence. It is a most important countervailing force in the noisy, chaotic madness of our times. The bulwark against clutter, noise, ugliness, haste, and waste. Simplicity transforms an insignificant act to worship. As the ego recedes and our decisions and actions are driven by unconditional love, life will continue to offer enchantments, beauty, and wonder. Guided by the sense of gratitude, every action becomes a thanksgiving. Contentment becomes the overall feeling that pervades life. Forgiveness becomes a natural gift. Kindness and compassion arise in the mind as spontaneously as tender leaves on a tree. This awakening is the great promise of life. This is our destiny, to discard the dark emotions of anger and fear, hatred and greed, jealousy and self-pity, and walk towards freedom and love, and redeem the sacred simplicity of our lives. It is liberation, mukti, nirvana. It is the beginning of our engagement with the great beauty of the infinite. Thank you very much. I think I have kept to my 15 minutes. Thank you very much for your patient understanding and listening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. Thank you. By listening to you, sir, it seems that once anyone, the reader, goes through this entire book, it's not only they would be reading The Simple Life, they will be more looking into simplifying life. So after reading this book, you'll be simplifying your life, and that's truly, truly the need of the hour, and truly inspiring, sir, to have heard from you. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. We would now like to start our discussion about this book from our panel, and we are starting off with our very first panelist, Reverend Dubum Tulkuchi. I would be like to request you, sir, if you may kindly start your insights into this book. May I have a pleasure of requesting you, sir?
Namaste. Audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible, sir.
Namaste. Good afternoon. And Tashtele. I would like to say that I'm very happy to be part of this book discussion. Normally, I'm not very active or eager to be part of panel discussions and so on. But this time, as soon as I heard the title of Simplicity, it was big attraction to me. I like the word simplicity. It's, I can say, most beautiful word. And secondly, I'm grateful to DELNET for inviting me to be part of this because of my association with, long-time association with DELNET since late Dr. Cole's time, and then now with Sangeeta ji and all the other colleagues. Uh, the title is Simple Life, and subtitle is an inquiry into the joys of simplicity in a complex world. Actually, we are meeting under a particular situation when there is not only, full of complexity, but also anxiety, in terms of ecological, natural conflicts, geopolitical complicated situation, and also in terms of people's attitude towards human value. So this kind of situation is rather cause of anxiety. But the question is what we, each individual, can do under such situation, whether or not we can contribute anything to improve the situation, or even, slow down the speed of deteriorating situation. So under such situation, such kind of discussion and giving thought on such beautiful subject like simplicity, simple living. So I will not be speaking long. Basically, I glimpsed through the book by Professor Jayakumar, and I found it is very inspiring and encouraging for people like me. And I would even say it is the need of hour. And whatever I'm saying is based on certain understanding of mine on this subject, and borrow here and there words and phrases and sentences from the author. Simplicity is a state of mind. It should not be taken only as a lifestyle, not only as a lifestyle. And simplicity should not be taken as antithesis of modernity. although it entails elements of austerity, still one has the freedom to choose the degree of austerity. Here, I feel it's also important to note that the austerity should not become a way of exhibiting how far one can go in austerity. Rather, simplicity involves some introspection to get to know how our real motive and motivation. That is very important and basic point the author made. Speaking about environmental subject, one should evolve into a responsible consumer. We are all consumer, and the Sanskrit word for consumer is upabhokta. And interestingly, the early Tibetan translators translated that word literally as sawapo. Sawapo actually literally means eater, the one who eats, right? So we are all eaters. We have to eat, otherwise we cannot survive. One should be a responsible consumer or responsible upabhokta or eater, and one should try to get liberated from the addictions of going for expensive kind of, designers, brands, and highly advertised goods, etc. One should buy because of necessity and not because the product is famous or because one wants to compete with friends. Products which are organic, less energy consuming, less polluting, that can be recycled or reused should be preferred. In this troubled time of environmental catastrophe, we should be more ecologically responsible and avoid wasteful use of resources. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, till COVID times, used to travel widely all over the world. And His Holiness once said that the first thing he does after checking in a hotel room is switch off all the unessential lights in the room. The modern life revolves around a feverish urge, and that urge leads a voluntary, not voluntary, but one should lead a voluntary simple life, and that will slow down the pace, and life becomes less stressful. That is my point on environmental issues. From the spiritual or moral point of view, it is not righteous way of living to spend extravagantly when most of other people around you are unable to spend even 10% of what you spend. In any case, in short, the slightest show of motives or motivation is involved in anything you do cannot be considered a right livelihood. In essence, we are governed by mindset. We are governed by a mindset of want. And we should make effort to change that mindset into a need. Should be need-based, not want-based. And we should believe the motto or the value, small is beautiful. And now my last point, in a social contact, people to people contact, community to community contact, country to country contact, one good example of simplicity is being straightforward and avoiding unnecessary and sophisticated way of, or complicated, sophisticated statement in communication. Sometimes we notice, people say something which means something else. Again, with intention of conveying something, yet another thing, and going round and round, not being straightforward is not the right way of communication. Of course, one needs to be tactful when you deal with people, and when you are choosing exchange of ideas. But of course, one needs to be tactful, but it doesn't mean make and use complicated languages. So I will close with this statement. Essentially, simple life or simplicity is harmonization of external and internal lives. That is the prerequisite to any attempt to seriously embrace simplicity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Revered Sir Dobun for sharing your insightful views about this book and also about the simplicity and simple life. Now, I take immense pleasure in requesting our next distinguished panelist, Professor Balaganpati Devrakondaji, to kindly start his address. It's over to you, Professor Bala.
Thank you. Namaste. Shri Jayakumar ji, a versatile genius from the land of Narayana Guru, an administrator, academician, author, all clubbed together. No, it's very rare to find such kind of genius these days. And Venerable Dobum Tulkuji, Managing Trustee of World Buddhist Culture Trust, former Director of Tibet House, Professor Anand Kumar ji, and Madam Sanjula Sharma ji, most importantly Dr. Sangeeta ji, because of whose efforts, untiring efforts, all of us are here and enjoying this platform, and other distinguished friends who have joined us today, and the audience who have joined us today for this book talk series. In fact, let me say something about the title itself, like book talk series. Actually, it's very appropriately chosen. Book speaks. Whether you listen to it or not is your problem, but book always speaks. Book already spoke, and we are only trying to do a hermeneutic exercise of understanding it and repeating it as it goes as our understanding. So it's not that book is speaking here, book already spoke, and that is how I feel that the title is most appropriate, book talk series. And I thank the author, Shri Jayakumar ji, for this wonderful opportunity that I got to read this book on simplicity and reflect on my own thoughts on simplicity and react to that. This is a wonderful opportunity that I have got. So I really thank the author for this wonderful opportunity. My basically talk I have divided into three parts. In the first part, I would talk about my reactions to the thoughts of the author or the book. Let me also not try to put the burden on the author. Let me put the burden on the book itself. That is the first one. And the second one I would talk about, as Jayakumar ji was referring during his talk, something that attracted me is concept of mind. So I focused myself on that particular chapter. So I would talk about that. And towards the end, I have my own thoughts about simple life. How do we look at this simple life? And what are the classical resources that we have? I pick it up from Bhagavad Gita and try to say something about that. So this is a threefold division that I have made. Let me begin with the first one. Like as when we look at the title itself, it says simple life. Which is more difficult to handle? Is it simple life that is more difficult to handle, or is it complex life that is more difficult to handle? And when we raise this question, we can look at our own lives, everyday life. Every day you get up and you try to do so many things and try to reach out to your office. Look at your own life and see whether simpler things are difficult to handle or difficult things, complex things are difficult to handle. And your mind tells you that simpler things are easy to handle and complex things are difficult to handle. But in your life, you would be actually practicing it quite oppositely. Why is it so? Why is it that the psyche of the individual, the modern psyche of the individual, so-called intellectual individual. No, we all boast ourselves to be intellectual individuals, and we have the modernity with us, we have the technological innovation with us, and this is all enabling us so much, and this is all making us express our freedom in a larger way. This is how we believe. And finally, we tend to be looking at or accepting the complexity to be the fact of life and going with it, though we implicitly, inwardly understand that it is the simplicity which is very important to the life. So this dichotomy or the paradox that each one of us have, I am not limiting anybody, all of us have this paradox in our mind, the complexity in our mind, the problematic in our mind with which we are going ahead. So this is one of the important things that we have to address to each other. I think the book, basically it already spoke, as I said, it is asking us to raise these questions to our own lives so that we get benefited out of the book, reading the book. Otherwise it is meaningless, no? Because book always would be valuable, whether it is Bhagavad Gita or the book on simplicity. But it is you and me who have to read and get benefited out of that. And how do we get benefited out of that? We have to react to the questions that are raised by the book and try to reflect within ourselves. So that is the basic foundation of philosophy as well. Philosophy always asks us to be self-reflective. Whatever you do, whatever you think, whatever you speak, you try to be reflective, self-reflective. That is what is required, and that's what leads you to lead a whatever goal of life that you have placed in front of you. So if that is the case, philosophically, my problem is, does human beings simplify things or complicate things? Philosophically, I'm saying, do we try to complicate things or do we try to simplify things? And we all know that if there is a problem, if there is a given problem, we all know that it is only, I'm sorry, it is only by simplifying things we can resolve them. And if we go in an opposite way, we would be making it, more disastrous kind of fun. So we all know that, but still, uh, does human beings simplify things or complicate things is another important question that each one of us have to ask with regard to our relationships. Okay, see, don't think that these are the questions that are of metaphysical importance or the larger philosophical importance, but these are important in the sense that when we are leading our own, when we are engaging with our relationships, because in the chapter on mind, Jayakumar ji talks about human relationships, and he says how important it is to look at the human relationships in the sense of the social self and the other. Oh, wonderful way he tries to explain. I'll come to that a little later. And what is the method of resolving human concerns? Is it by simplifying things or complicating things? We all know the answers, but we tend to choose the other way. So why is it so? And when we look at this simplicity, we have theoretical or the practical solutions as well. If we look at the contemporary Indian scenario, as Mahatma Gandhi advocated, as Jayakumar ji spoke about it, like need-based, it should not be greed-based. No, even Dobum ji has mentioned about this. The life has to be need-based, but it should not be greed-based. Okay, and that is how there is a theory called the minimalism theory. So you have to go towards the minimalism. If you go on complicating things or cluttering things, if I take the word of Jayakumar ji, if you go on cluttering things in the life, then there is no way you would simplify things and you would lead the life that you want to lead. So that is how minimalism is one of the theories that has come up. But the problem is, where do we define minimalism is one of the major concerns that comes up. Even with regard to need and greed, where do we draw the line? And you may, a wise person like Jayakumar ji may draw a line somewhere at the 10th point, and I may be drawing the line at 90th point. So where do we draw the line is very important. That's how people are not able to understand, even after earning 100,000 crores, they're not still stopping, right? So because they don't know where to draw the line. So that's the kind of epistemological structures that we have built among our own younger generations, and we have let them go that way. No, this globalization wave that we talk about, which has come from 1990s onwards, which has dominated the human life, and because of which this our undergraduate students also started getting 50, 60,000 of rupees salary immediately after undergraduate programs, basically liberated them in one way and opened them into the global economy in another way. But at the same time, it did not help them much in the sense that how to look at the life, no? which was completely missing in their conceptions. So minimalism has lost its relevance, which is very important for us to look at. And the other important thing is, when we talk about simplicity or complexity, where do we situate it? Do we situate it in the subject, in me, or do I situate this simplicity or complexity in the world with which I am interacting continuously and experiencing continuously? Obviously, wise people would say that it is not completely in the subject, it is not completely in the object or the external world, but it is the relation between the individual subject and the object or the external world. That's what makes the life as it is, and that is how complication or simplicity has to be in the interaction of the individual with the external world. If we take that to be the space where we have to situate simplicity or complexity, unless we are clear about where to situate this simplicity and complexity, it becomes very difficult for us to handle the problematic that I was mentioning in the initial stage. So often we tend to understand that this simplicity or complexity has to be situated in the objective world, and the individual's relation or individual's action and reaction with the objective world. So if we take that to be the case, there is a very interesting thing that I want to mention. The more knowledgeable you become, the more complicated you become. No, that's what we say. Even intellectuals, when they write articles in journals, nobody understands. Finally, the ordinary man will not be able to understand what is being written in the journal Nature, right? So if that is the case, what is the use of that article, that knowledge that that has existed, that is supposed to help the individual? So the more you gain knowledge, which means we often divide philosophy into 4 branches. Metaphysics is the first one, where you try to conceptualize the reality. The more you get into the conceptualization of reality, actually it is supposed to simplify things, simplify life, but now it is more and more complicating life. Similarly, the other branch of knowledge that we look at is epistemology, the way you gain knowledge, theory of knowledge. And even theory of knowledge, instead of simplifying, helping the individual in simplifying life, is more complicating. Whether you look at the modernity, or whether you look at post-modernity, even post-modernity is also not simplifying things. In the name of simplifying things, it is more complicating things. So the growth of the knowledge, theory of knowledge that we are talking about, is also continuously complicating things for us. And the third important one that we talk about is logic. Logic means the way you think, the thinking patterns, and the way you use the language. Language and logic go together all the time. And even here, we tend to complicate things. We give more importance to complicate things than simplifying them. But actual role of the logic is to simplify things and make the individual's life more happy. The fourth important branch that we talk about is ethics. Even here, things are more and more getting complicated than simplifying. Okay, so the contemporary person that Jayakumar ji was referring to, who is living in the contemporary consumeristic world, is in fact, in terms of both metaphysics, epistemology, logic, and ethics, is more and more complicating his life than simplifying it. This is a very important philosophical crisis that I see, in the emergent world as we have now. So this is the case with the external world. If we place simplicity and complexity in the external world, or in the relation between the individual and the external world. But there is another way of looking at things and trying to address them. And that other way is locating the simplicity or complexity within the self, within the subject. Okay, that is very important to me. And I think Indian tradition largely contributes to that shift or that focus. Okay, so because knowing world is there is an epistemological limitation. You can never know the world in totality, but knowing self is a possibility. No, I'm not saying you can know it completely, but it is a possibility in the sense that once at least if you are true to yourself, you can claim to be knowing your own self. So that is how knowing the other is always incomprehensible, and probably it's not possible all the time. But knowing the self is one of the very important possibilities that in fact pushes us to say that if you want to whether either complicate or simplify life, you become self-reflective. And in fact, even in this chapter on mind, Jayakumar ji often talks about honest reflection, self-reflection. And he also hints something about third eye, where you have to be reflective of your own actions, which is termed as vichara in Advaita Vedanta terminology. You have to become you have to develop a kind of inquiry which is called vichara. Now, vichara is not just like a police inquiry kind of one to know the other. It is an inquiry which is an honest inquiry into the self. That is what is very important, and that's what he tries to touch. So when I look at this the text, simple life, in fact I find a kind of stress on looking at the individual, working on the individual, knowing the self. If you look at the classical Indian philosophical literature, everywhere the question that is addressed is, who am I? Koham. Who am I and who are you? Right? You have to know about yourself. That is the only way of knowing yourself. It's not just knowing yourself, knowing the other as well. No, if you try to know the other in terms of an external other, then you would always be dividing the other and creating more complexities than simplifying. Once you try to understand the other in terms of the self, then it becomes very easy to simplify things, simplify relationships, and simplify our experiences as well. That's what is being stressed in this work of Jayakumar ji. And what I looked at, there are certain statements which really attracted me that I thought I should mention about in this mind, the Lord of the Destiny. In fact, if we look at this Advaita Vedanta especially, it tells us that Manayeva Manushyanam Karanam Bandhamokshayo. It says mind is the one which binds you. And it is not that it is the one which only binds you and that is how it is a culprit. No, it is the one which can liberate you as well. See, if you are bound by a rope, and rope is the one which is to be untied, right? So that is how, if the mind is the one which binds you, it is the mind which can liberate you as well. And this spirit of Advaita Vedanta, I'm not sure whether Jayakumar ji is an Advaitin or a scholar who has read Narayan Guru and Shankara very well. But this spirit comes out very well in this particular chapter, which I really appreciate. And he says, simplifying life is essentially decluttering the mind. That's what he has said in the introduction as well. No? He says that the hypothesis or the problem that he has identified and tried to address is pursuit of happiness is the cause of unhappiness of the contemporary person, right? The way you are pursuing happiness itself is a problematic one. When your pursuit of happiness itself, with the means that you are that you have accepted and going with, is a problem, then obviously the kind of happiness that you get at the end of the day is also not complete happiness, right? So the pursuit itself is wrongly oriented, wrongly conceptualized. That's where I'm saying that the epistemology, human epistemology of each one of us is modeled and developed in such a way that we would only go for such kind of empirical niceties, instead of going for more divine virtues that the Wum Tulkuji was mentioning with regard to Buddhism. And similarly, he also talks about the internal and external simplicity. It is not that simplicity is only internal simplicity or external simplicity. He gives importance to both of them. External simplicity is important, but it doesn't end there. It has to lead to internal simplicity, or in fact, internal simplicity is more important than external simplicity, he says. No, internal simplicity is the one which leads to external simplicity. Unless you have this attitude of simplicity in the mind, you will not lead a simple life, right? So internal simplicity is given more importance, but there is one aspect where I slightly beg to disagree with Jayakumar ji, because when he talks about this internal and external simplicity, he says he says that we can take reports from both Western ideas as well as Indian spiritualism, and Western ideas, in fact, advocate a kind of harmonious existence. This is what he says. This is his own statement that I'm mentioning, and he says Eastern world gives the spirituality. But I would beg to differ with him in saying that though external ideas do contribute in terms of harmonious existence, they only talk about harmonious existence of the external world. They never give any importance to the internal element of it, and that is how when they talk about peace, concept of peace, they only limit themselves to the external peace. They can never reach out to the internal peace and accept that unless there is an internal peace inside the individual, it cannot be, external peace cannot be achieved. But they would argue that no, external peace is the precondition for internal peace. That is how you impose external peace. Once you have imposed external peace, it is no more peace, right? it is a kind of war situation, so it cannot be understood that way. So that is how I slightly beg to differ with this idea. And simplicity, he understands as a movement from physical to psychological and spiritual. So that is another interesting aspect that I really appreciate, because instead of limiting it to the physical, extending it to the psychological, and taking it further to spirituality. Sangeeta ji, if I am crossing my limits, please let me know. Can I 5 more minutes? Yeah. So taking it to the spirituality is very important, and that is where, as I was saying, unless you get into your own self, you cannot extend your own self. So that's where the hint of Manayav Manushyanam Karanam Bandha Moksha comes into existence. So with this, he also makes an interesting distinction between social self and the other. Other is a kind of invisible self, or self that exists in disguise in each one of us. And he says the social self is the one which is accepted identity. We try to promote it, in the social sphere, but in a disguised way, there is an inner other self which tries to create problems for each one of us, and that is how that's what contributes to the complexities of life as well. Though you may know that this is the simple way of leading life, but this inner self, which the invisible inner self is the one which puzzles the life, which creates a problematic of the life and our reactions to the world as well. And this is where he says this invisible persona tries to keep the dead yesterday alive, okay, and constantly distort the present. So our present is the one which we are supposed to enjoy, is the one in which we are supposed to be simple and happy, but it gets troubled only because of this invisible other self, which tries to distort our own real and ideal conflict. So this has come out really well in his work, his chapter on the mind. The other last important point I must mention is we get bound by, see, I'm mentioning these things because being an administrator, being an author, and being a part of movie industry as well, script writer, etc. He had an opportunity of looking at the psychology of the individuals very well. Okay, and that's what given him a chance to analyze the self. Okay, so that's where he says there is an inner judge in each one of us, and along with this inner judge, there is a perfectionist as well who is sitting in each one of us. Okay, and this inner judge is a complicated one. No, he's not just judging things, no? Because we understand these days that judgmentality is a wrong attitude. It's not just judging fairly. It is ego-centered image of a correct person that we have. That is the inner judge, and these two aspects are the ones which contribute to the complexity of human life. So what I am trying to, by reading Jayakumar ji, present here is it's like it's not just a psychologist that we find in the text. It is not just a sociological explanation that we find in the text. It is a philosopher, at the with the background of I would say Advaita Vedanta as well, because I am exposed to Advaita Vedanta more. So a philosopher, sociologist, and psychologist, and a spiritualist, all of them make their presence, especially in this chapter, with which I am immensely benefited. So just to conclude, what I believe to be the simple life that we find in Bhagavad Gita, it says that during our life, we have to deal with three things. One is objects, the other one is people, the third one is experiences. And how do you do that? How do you handle these three in your life? The principle that is advocated is samatha, equanimity. Equanimity doesn't mean treat everybody equally. Equanimity here clearly means give everything its due place. Okay, so it's not that you should treat stone and gold as equal. It is that you should treat stone as stone because it has an importance in life, gold as gold because it has its own importance. So similarly, giving equal importance to the objects, giving equal importance to the people, giving equal importance to the due importance, not equal importance, due importance to the experiences is what is very important. And probably by following this kind of a principle, we would be able to reach a kind of simple life. We would be able to lead a kind of simple life. That's what I believe. But I must admit that I am immensely benefited by reading this book, and it urges us to look into our own selves. So that's how it helped me as well. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you so much, sir, Sangeeta ji, for this opportunity, and Jayakumar ji for this wonderful work. Namaste.
Thank you very much, Professor Bala, for such a superb analysis of this entire book. And in a very short span of not more than 15-20 minutes, you have been really able to bring such a beautiful picture of this entire book with your own insights. As you rightly said, that this is not just simply a book. The Shri K. Jayakumar ji's vast experience of working in the various domains that he has immensely contributed, in fact, has been brought into words. All his experiences has been brought into words here, and more. It is more now for the others to take, the lessons out of it. As you have rightly said, it's more a philosophical, psychological, the spiritual journeys that you have undergone, and everything has been being immersed now, and they are a part of this wonderful title. Thank you so much for doing such a superb, I think Shri K. Jayakumar sir may like to say something, being an author of the book, and would like to react. Sir, may I request you, sir, if you may like to say something?
I think I will not react now because I'm actually
Okay,
enraptured by I'm actually enraptured by what he has said. Let it sink in. I'll react towards the end.
Fine, sir. Okay, thank you. But indeed, it's always such a great honor and pleasure, Professor Bala, and we really mean that. Your insights. This is being. You have proved it again and again. You hold such a great experience, and you have been really so kind. Or you were traveling, but you took out time. We sent you the book, and you have gone through it. The title thoroughly, and we really look forward to many more occasions, and you have also dwelt into many other aspects, and we could see that our attendees nearly 320. I'm looking at the numbers, not even there is an adage of the numbers happening, but no one, because everyone is spellbound, with the kind of a narrative that you have given of the book, and also about your own philosophy about the simple life. So thank you very much once again, Professor Bala, and it has been really a great honor for us to have you on this platform with us today. Thank you very much. Thanks. We would now like to go to our next distinguished panelist, Dr. Anand Kumarji, and have a pleasure in requesting Professor Anand today is at Prayagraj in Allahabad. And it's a pleasure that he has been able to make it, though in spite of his busy travel that he's doing nowadays. He has been very kind in accepting our request to be there with us this afternoon. May I have a pleasure of requesting you, Dr. Anand Kumarji, to kindly give your insights about this wonderful title. Over to you, Dr. Anand.
Thank you, Sangeeta ji, Jayakumar ji, Sangeeta ji, and Reverend Tulku, and Professor Bala Ganpati, and Sanjula ji. I am very delighted that Jayakumar ji has recalled Shangri-La and our banishment from there, and our lost joys of a simple life in the time of consumerism and environmental degradation. And I think that environmental degradation now overrides all human concerns, including health, wealth, and even terror, because it's going to be a real problem in coming future. And I have gone through this book, and I must say it's really a very beautiful 58-page book, and it is about the resurrection of man and the planet. It speaks about the restoration of the lost values, love, compassion, contentment, and human relationships. It is about the harmful effects of greed and consumerism on environmental degradation and our physical and mental health. It is about the incessant propaganda which shows luxuries as necessities. It is about the meaning. This book talks about the meaning of human success, which now judged by only your success in position and power and money, and the misery that has been recently brought by Corona has shown us that any amount of wealth, position cannot secure life and its joys. The COVID pandemic is the byproduct of the industrial and knowledge-based civilization. The epidemic has torn open the glaring inequalities in our society and the failure of our governments to contain the poisoned environment with the best technologies at hand. A class of people are striving hard to feed and educate their children, while another has closeted themselves in the cozy ambience of their homes with social media entertainment, but both are insecure today. And in India, our people, they live in all ages. They are from the Iron Age, people are living in Iron Age, and people are living in the age of post-humanism. Today, as the agricultural stage passed away, industrial age has also, it has passed away in the West, it's passing away in India, and now it is the, post-humanism that is ushering in, that is the age of artificial intelligence that is taking over. And about this, I would like to tell you something. There is a very important European economist. His name is Dr. Mark Giese, and he was employed by the European Union to survey the condition of European economy in coming decades. And this fellow, Dr. Giese, I had a privilege of meeting him in Oroville. This fellow appointed about 100 economists, and all of them surveyed. And they reported that in future decades, not very far, maybe 30 years, there will be 80% unemployment in the West. He said, we don't know about India, but in the West. And this report was buried by the European parliamentarians and governments, because it was very uncomfortable and a lot of questions were to be answered. And this is all because of the post-humanism which has invaded us. Can simplicity in our life save us from this brewing trouble? Can our body, mind, and society sustain this kind of post-humanism where children are still malnourished and have poor access to education and basic amenities, rich out of boredom and poor out of frustration have taken to drugs and guns? And Jayakumar ji says in the book that today our lives are an antithesis to simplicity, beauty, and contentment. A life without simplicity will invariably be devoid of joyfulness, for they are twins. He points that simplicity is the most effective countervailing force to redeem our lives wasted in clutter, clamor, and hollowness. A simple life redeems the essentials of the beauty of life. And now coming to, he mentions that, how consumerism is being promoted by incessant propaganda, and even the, not only people and societies, even the governments have succumbed to him, because he has been one of the pivots of the governmental apparatus. So he knows it very well when he says that even the governments are falling prey to this kind of incessant propaganda of consumerism. And he mentions that about, the Kaun Banega Crorepati or the slumdog millionaire syndrome. It is not accidental. It harmonizes with the prevailing ethos of greed, waste, and conspicuous consumption. Today's bestsellers are not the Gita or the Bible, but the books which define success by money, position, and material position. They give a recipe of success, which in turn bestows happiness and freedom to mankind. And the power of propaganda is so immense in controlling human behavior, it can make them sick. I'll just tell you an example. About 35 years ago, at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, a Russian scientist came and he showed some data that the dogs were conditioned by this Pavlovian method, and he had kept various bowls with goodies. And when he'll give a signal, the dog will go to a particular bowl and take the goodie. And then what he did, then he reduced the duration of signals, and he gave many signals. And the dog was unable to decide which bowl to go, which bowl to leave. And then he started giving simultaneous signals for all the bowls. This is the effect of propaganda. The dog lost its hair. It developed peptic ulcers, hypertension, and diabetes. So this is the effect of propaganda which we are facing, and consumerism will bring all these things on our health also. And consumption, of course, we know is at a faster pace than our management of the waste disposal. So much of electronic waste is coming, the amounts of electronic waste. In Delhi, I saw somewhere, when you go towards the airport, There is an area where so many used computers are kept in the open. They don't know how to dispose that. And in our culture, particularly in the Nath Yoga, the professor might be knowing it better. In Nath Yoga and even in Tantra, we believe that the Pindan or the microcosm and the Brahman, they are almost the same. The microcosm, that is the human body, represents the whole of the cosmos. And the Nath yogis even identify the presence of rivers and land masses, continents, countries, oceans and seas, gods, everything within the human body. They identify different areas. So each being I say, that is present in the cosmos is present in the human being also. So the Nath yogis say, if the Yamuna dries, the Yamuna is represented by the calmness of the human mind, or that they call Ida Nadi. The Hatha yogis call it Ida Nadi. So if the Yamuna dries, something in our mind also dries. There is such kind of relationship between the environment and the body of man. So this is how we kept our environment pure and purified and made it holy. We had, every place was holy. The trees were holy. They were not to be cut. There are certain trees, which grew over a long time and which were very long lived, like people tree and banyan tree. They were never cut. So that was our a connection with the simple life. But now it all is going away. And so having said that, now I again come back to the book, that the only remedy, as he says, is the control, self-control, that we should be able to realize that what is actually our need and what is the luxury. Often we are confused between the luxury and our real need. So we think that the luxury is our real need. So the book also gives you a way how to decide what you need to, he says very beautifully that we must ask the question. I have lost the quotation. He in the book it says that we must ask the question whenever we want to have a thing, whether it is necessary, whether we can do without it, and in case we don't get it, how will it affect us? So he says in such a beautiful language, and of course, as you say, that it has a very deep philosophy, but it's a very practical manual of simple living. And he says that the search of happiness often ends in suffering, misery, tragedy. Most of the ailments are indeed the consequence of the blind pursuit of happiness. The seed of misery is often within the fruit of enjoyment. And he expresses, that the feeling of compassion and love are dying in human beings. And the simple reason of it is because of the relationships are dying. And the relationships for human beings are very important. If a man goes into isolation with all the time with his mobile and with his computer or with his TV, with having very remote contact with other human beings, the relationship goes away. And he talks about the seers and sages, although they appear to be in the Himalayas or some remote place, but they are actually not disconnected. They are connected with the whole cosmos. So they may appear, but their human relationships, the compassion and the love, that has not dried up. Whereas with this kind of consumerism, development of selfishness, development of isolation, we are even, losing human relationship. And he very nicely points out that this kind of isolation is some sort of punishment. Even when one is punished and given a jail term is what? Only isolation. So isolation is not a very good idea indeed. It's a so compassion and love, Reverend Tulku is here. It's so important in life that you don't need to bother about God. You need not bother about, your soul. Only by love and compassion and ethical living, Buddha has attained nirvana. Just by compassion and living for others without any selfish motive in any action, one becomes niskama. And once one is doing action without any personal motive or without any self-interest in that, the interest is only for the others, one attains nirvana. One need not God, or need not bother about the soul. This is how, Buddha preached nirvana only by ethical living. So, Shri Jayakumar defines karma yoga, but he does not name it to keep the matter simple. His writing is really very, very simple, but if it's very deep, as our professor of philosophy has said. And he writes, simplicity transforms an insignificant act to worship. As Buddha says, simplicity transforms an insignificant act to worship. As the ego recedes and our decisions and actions are driven by unconditional love, life will continue to offer enchantments. This is karma yoga. Enchantment, beauty and wonder. Guided by the sense of gratitude, every action becomes a thanksgiving. Contentment becomes the overall feeling that pervades life. Then you are contented. Once the desire goes away, you are contented. You are working only for others. Forgiveness becomes a natural gift. Kindness and compassion arise in the mind as spontaneously as tender leaves on a tree. Jayakumar had read that. And finally, because time is getting over and I don't want to bore people, I have written a very long write-up, because I was quite fascinated by this book. And so finally, I would conclude that this book deserves to be widely circulated and given free to every teacher and every student in the 10th standard. Every, somehow maybe it should be put on the net or somewhere so that everyone has an access. The language is so simple, the ideas are so simple, without any, complication. And it should be translated in their mother tongues also. So that, I really, I went through it and I found it's very good for schoolers. This is the time for character building and, giving the message to everybody. More than us, perhaps, if it goes to the schoolers, it will transform lives. And now I will end with a Japanese haiku poem, which the author has, quoted here. I say, he says, the haiku says, an ancient pond, a frog jumps in, the sound of water, silence. The frog submerges in the silence of the sound. Here I am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Anand Kumarji, for such a very exhaustive insights into this book. And as you said, it's a practical manual of simple living, and we should try also to see that how our young students, how our young children can imbibe these great values early in the life, so that it can have an impacting, effect on their lives. Thank you so very much for joining us and for giving such a wonderful interpretation about this particular wonderful title. Thank you, Professor Anand, from each one of us at DELNET, and also on behalf of each of the attendees. Now, I would like to request Mrs. Sanjula Sharmaji. Sanjula, it's a pleasure for us to have you with us on this platform, and I would like to request you to kindly give your insights about this title. It's over to you, Sanjula.
Thank you so much, Sangeeta. A very good evening to everyone listening in. You know, it's a pleasure for me to be here sharing space with a distinguished panel whom I've been listening to with rapt attention, and of course, engaging in dialogue with a celebrated author in the limelight. I want to commend Sangeeta for starting such a wonderful initiative. And I also want to say that she is superb in organizing events. Many grateful thanks, Sangeeta, for giving me this forum to speak on such a wonderful book. Mr. Jayakumar, I have spent happy moments reading your wonderful book and gaining insights into the joys of simplicity in a complex world. At the outset, let me congratulate you for writing on such an intriguing theme, and most significantly, presenting it in such a convincing, lucid, and attractive manner. Many years ago, Paramhans Yoganand said, "Be as simple as you can be. You will be astonished to see how uncomplicated and happy your life can become." Ancient wisdom advocated a simple life, but we ignored this to move forward into a complex world with newly acquired wings of complications. But books such as the one Mr. Jayakumar has written sheds new light upon legendary learnings and beautifully roots out an effective roadmap to a promised sanctuary. When I initially picked up the book, I asked myself, am I, as an individual, living a simple life? And if not, will this book show me the way forward? I am happy to share that it does. For the simple reason, it offers simplicity as a path that is accessible, a path that is viable. The book gives compelling reasons, and many of them, why a simple, uncomplicated life is filled with joyfulness. You know, Mr. Jayakumar says, joyfulness and simplicity are twins. The author states that simplicity is not simple, an ironic statement if you look at it, but so true, because simplicity is not easy to achieve. Let me read an excerpt from a book that highlights this. For those of you who are following from the book, this is page 19. Those who consider the simple life as incompatible with modern times form the majority. They do not deem it as practical. For those of us immersed in the torrent of modern life, characterized by its hectic pace, power of the market, comfort provided by modern technologies, and the possibilities of better profits and income, the notion of an alternative lifestyle is not only unacceptable, but unwarranted. Why should anyone welcome an alternative that repudiates all these blessings? It should be clarified that the idea of simplicity being outlined here is not the same as enforced poverty or total renunciation. Simplicity in the context of argument does not seek to expel from life modern technologies or consumer goods or other comforts. It pleads for better discretion and vigilance in consumption. It promises to purge our homes and minds of dross. You know, I like the fact that Mr. Jayakumar does give a disclaimer, one that almost comes as a relief. We don't have to become an ascetic to lead a simple life. We continue living in a complex world, not ignoring what it offers in terms of advancement, economic growth, and technology, but using it in sensible and limited measure. The author explains it all logically in the context of the sorcery of consumerism, the pitfalls of capitalism, the buying and brand mania, based on the modern dictum, I shop, therefore I am. The cluttering of space, both physical and mental, the obsession with new technology and gadgets, the huge leaning towards more and bigger and better, and then that sinking into the abyss of absolute materialism. There is no space for the abstract here. These are concrete facts that the author delineates and advises, avoiding these wrong signposts. So the whole plan of leading a simple life also becomes both logical and practical. A decluttered home is the first road sign on the journey towards a simple life. Clutter in our houses is also essentially the antithesis of beauty. I quote Mr. Jayakumar, while the anxiety about the future prods towards senseless accumulation, the emotional attachment to the past is also a major cause of clutter. Maybe the child who obstinately held on to the broken toy is still alive in us, even in mature adulthood. I love this line. The roots of physical clutter must also be searched in the mind. The writer gives emphasis to the fact that the mind is supreme. And here I delve into ancient scriptures that taught us to train our mind like a merchant trains his horses, advised us to make our mind a fortress because the body is a fragile clay pot. I want to just read a little from this, explaining this, that free of prejudices and preconceived notions, the human mind redeems the faculty to love. It is the enslavement to the idea of the binaries, good or bad, beautiful or ugly, desirable or undesirable, that dictates the rules of love. When the distorting lenses, and I want to emphasize this, when the distorting lenses are removed, the eyes are able to perceive a different and a better picture. What was seen as a serpent turns into a rope. What appeared as threatening presences were indeed shadows. It will dawn on us that life is too precious to be wasted by following the wrong signposts. Drawing from the beautiful prayer composed by Saint Francis, my personal favorite piece for meditation, Mr. Jayakumar talks of how hatred can be won over only by love, and anger can be doused only by tranquility and patience. In his testament in the book, the writer states, a life of internal and external simplicity is not a utopian ideal. It is a practical idea that has its roots in Western ideas of harmonious existence and Eastern spirituality. In subsequent chapters, he talks about simplicity on various levels, physical, emotional, and mental, the internal and the external, differentiates between satisfaction and contentment. One is fleeting, the other is long-lasting and comes from within. Contain the contentment is the underlying message given here. This resonates with me, for I do believe the everlasting present is all we have. And I read from the book. We go to page 52, for those who are following it. A close look at our thoughts will make it clear that they are mostly recollections of bygone events and anxiety or excitement about the future. The mind, where thoughts and feelings of yesterday and tomorrow elbow for space, can hardly accommodate the thoughts of today. The past and the future sandwich the present, which alone is real. The concept is individual as well as universal. If simplicity is within us, only then can we influence others to walk this path. And of course, one overriding force pervades it all, the power of love. I want to read an excerpt here that showcases not just the writer's total engagement with the theme of the book, but also the beauty of his language, which is steeped in poetry. Mr. Jayakumar is a true poet, and this very obviously reflects in his prosic writing. This is page 68, and I really love the way he has expressed himself here. The mind empowered by love is able to see new sights and hear new voices. The majestic sunrise and tranquil sunsets we had never noticed while speeding through the express highway of life suddenly beckons to us. We begin to notice the azure sky with scattered floating clouds and the gentle afternoon breeze that would go back and return to the flowering bush like a lusty lover. We discover the presence of so many birds in the vicinity. Our eyes begin to appreciate the patterns of cloud formation before a downpour, and our ears catch the cadence of the monsoon rains. We marvel at the brief life of insects and butterflies and listen to the chirping cicadas at night. They were around us all the while, yet we had no eyes to see and no ears to hear as our mind was clogged. This new freedom entitles us to relish and savor the lively heartbeat of the present moment in the midst of the bounty all around. And contentment begins to descend on us naturally, making every moment beautiful and precious. Now, many of the author's insights are spiritual, and based on Hinduism and also other sacred text teachings. Love from the Bible. Being equal in pleasure and pain, equanimity from the Bhagavad Gita. Looking inwards from the Upanishads. The Lakshman Rekha from the Ramayana, and leading a noble life from Buddha teachings. I do feel that any book that is based on such high ideals and solid spiritual tenets must have added value. Even before we reach the chapter Awakening to Beauty and Truth, where he talks of Gautam Buddha and Jesus Christ, we have already come across subtle but definitive spiritual overtones in his writing, and this is what I have absolutely related to. I shared the book with 3 people belonging to 3 different generations. My father, who is 90 years old and has always led a very simple life. My husband, who is a doctor and of course now a very strong COVID warrior, like of course Professor Anand Kumar and the whole medical fraternity, and my daughter, who is embarking on a teaching and a literary career. Interestingly, there was one strong common observation, that the book is an eye-opener and a pressing need of the times. Like every good book, this one also has many facets, as was already discussed so wonderfully by the erudite panelists present with me. What I want to emphasize is that the book is universal in scope and holistic in execution. It is not limited to one country or one era. It is not tied to just you and me. It belongs to humanity. It not only encapsulates a beautiful vision of a simple life, but also, and more importantly, kindly leads us towards it. And that, I think, is the hallmark of this book. For it inspires us to choose the path of simplicity, the road less traveled, but definitely the one that leads to happier horizons. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Sanjula ji, for what a beautiful depiction of this entire title in such a beautiful way. You know, there are no words to express because there has been a blending. The author Shri K. Jayakumar ji, undoubtedly one of the most finest writer and a poet. He has blended it so nicely in this particular book. And you have also done, being a discussant of this book here, you have also blended your own traits of being a writer and a poet. And you have really captured some of the things that has skipped the attention in a way that, yes, because you had seen it from a very different perspective, and conveying that how this book has conveyed and echoed, and it will resonate with everyone, as you said, that this will be something which is applicable across the nations, across it belongs to humanity, this title. It's a soul searching title, irrespective of religion, caste, creed, nations. And we are indeed touched with your very beautiful, insightful thoughts about this title. Thank you so very much, Sanjula ji, once again, on behalf of DELNET and on behalf of each one of us on this platform. Now, we would like to make the floor open for questions. Well, before we proceed further, we have our attendees who may like to ask the questions. So we would like to make the floor open for questions now. I'm firstly unmuting our distinguished author, Shri K. Jayakumar ji, because there will be many questions coming to him. And also for all our distinguished panelists, we are making the floor open for questions now. Please raise your digital hand if you may like to pose any question to the author, Shri K. Jayakumar ji, or to any of our distinguished panelists. We can see that we have Dr. Brijesh Srivastava who may like to ask a question. Dr. Brijesh Srivastava, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Dr. Brijesh Srivastava, because of paucity of time, I will just announce your name once, and if you're not able to unmute yourself, we will push off to the next attendee. I think you're not able to do that. Please raise your digital hand if you may like to ask any question to the author or to any of our panelists today. We have our noted writer and a poet, Mrs. Mandira Ghosh, who is there with us, and she may like to ask a question. Mandira, could you please unmute yourself? Mrs. Mandira is also a treasurer at the Poetry Society India. Mandira, I have unmuted you. Could you please unmute yourself and ask your question?
I will do that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear you, Mandira. Please go ahead.
Hearty congratulations, K. Jayakumar ji. Now that your views, what I understood, are against capitalism, but instead of going deep into the communism or the Marxism, you have developed another line of solution to the problem of the complex world through the Indian senses of spirituality. That is something which has really appealed to me. Now my question to you, sir, can we put this clock back? Is it possible to take the clock back to an ancient era when there was simple living? I don't think it is possible, but if you think if it is possible, then it is how?
Can I answer that? Shall I answer that? Because for want of time?
Yes.
Yes, sir, please.
Mandira, you see, we cannot put the clock back. But then the developments in our society, the civilizational crisis that we have invited on ourselves, will force us to put the clock back and change our ways. Now, every author is a bird which rises early in the day. You see, every author, not only me, there are hundreds of authors and poets who are concerned about the impending doom, impending disaster. So every author is in his own humble way trying to protest, saying that, look, it is time to make amends, do something. We cannot pull back the, I have said, I admitted in the book, the huge machinery of the huge economic uh, juggernaut that is working day and night to make us consumers and to spoil this earth. We cannot do anything
Yes.
about that. But if we become responsible consumers, if a million people become
Yes.
responsible consumers, then the demand for unnecessary things come down. So the demand on earth goes down. So I think we'll have to work backwards. So the thing is, we
Yes.
cannot wait for the ideal moment to happen in history where everybody changes, therefore I also change. I think a
Right.
responsible human being should be the agent of change and let the world follow us or may not follow us. But we have done what is possible within our individual possibility. I think that is all this book can argue about. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you, Mandra, for
Thank you.
joining
Thank
us
you,
today.
sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. We would now like to go to our next attendee who may like to ask a question. I'm just quickly sifting through. We have Nivedita Bhattacharya who may like to ask a question. Mrs. Nivedita, please kindly unmute yourself. I have unmuted you. Please unmute yourself and you may kindly ask the question. Nivedita Bhattacharya, Nivedita, please unmute yourself. I have already unmuted you. Nivedita, if you can do that, please unmute yourself. She has to raise her hand again because we are not able to get connected. Let me just quickly go to our next attendee who may like to ask a question to our author. We have Mrs. Savita Pradhan who may like to ask a question. Savita, please unmute yourself. Savita, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Those of you, if you're encountering any technical glitches, you can post your question in the chat box and we'll be very happy to take that question. Savita Pradhan, please unmute yourself. Let me just quickly move to the next, because if you're not able to get connected because of some technical reasons, we just request you post your question. We have Yashwant Chaudhary who may like to ask a question. Mr. Yashwant Chaudhary, I have unmuted you. Could you please unmute yourself and ask the question? Mr. Yashwant Chaudhary, could you please unmute yourself and ask the question? No, not able to do it. So I'll just take, because there are a couple of questions which we can see. I'll just be asking one of the question which is there. And the question is, sir, here is this question from Mr. Ramakrishna Mitra, who may like to ask, do you think that the concept of simplicity differs from one person to another? Do you think that the concept of simplicity differs from one person to another? If the answer is yes, then how can we understand and implement the ideas of simple life in common?
Yeah, to enforce one style fits for all or one type fits for all, one type of simplicity fits for all would be a self-defeating exercise. It will be a very complex exercise. So if I really believe in simplicity, I should understand that every individual should be able to tailor or arrive at his own accepted mode of leading a responsible, simple life. That will prevent the danger of enforcing something. There is no enforcement. We'll have to discover our own what suits us better. A millionaire may be simple. Maybe he might decide to lead a very simple life, but he may be spending 100 times more than what we spend. But for him, it is a simplification. He's downgraded himself. Whereas, so we cannot enforce one simple law for everyone. I think it's a question of our attitude. How do we reduce our demand, and how do we reduce our impact, our own personal impact on this environment, and make life less complicated? Even if it is not fully simplified, how can we make it less complicated? That is it.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. We have yet another attendee, Mrs. Kanchan Bhardwaj, I believe from India International Center, Assistant Librarian, who may like to ask a question. Kanchan, I have unmuted you. Mrs. Kanchan Bhardwaj. Yes, Kanchan, you are connected.
Good evening, everyone. Namaste. And
Namaskar.
I'm not having no question, but I have to congratulate to all. Congratulations, sir. Congratulate to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Kanchan. Thank you so much. Not from ISC. It was not Kanchan from ISC. There was, I believe, we didn't ask her from which institution. We'll just quickly going through. This is an alphabetical listing to see if you want to ask any question quickly, you can post it also in the chat box, or you can raise your digital hand. These are all the new terminologies now we are learning, using the. So if you want to ask anything, I'll just. Last time, yeah, we had Mr. Abdul Wahid who may like to ask a question. Mr. Abdul Wahid, could you please unmute yourself? Mr. Abdul Wahid, could you please unmute yourself if you want to ask a question? We have unmuted you. I think is not able to do that. We are towards the closure because I'm just quickly glancing through this entire list. We have Chetan Matade who may like to ask a question. Chetan, I have unmuted you. Quickly ask your question. On the right hand side, Chetan, okay, I think he's not able to unmute himself, and he has posted a question. And the question is, I heard greatness lies in simplicity, but how to overcome the abundance and diversity of life? How to overcome distractions like Maya in cosmic world? So this is asked by Chetan Matade. Would you like to, sir, react to it, or any of our panelists may like to react to it?
I think Professor Balaganapati should take that question because he's asking about how to overcome Maya. Not a very simple thing.
Yeah,
Not
I think I would request, Professor Bala, maybe request you. Greatness lies in simplicity, but how to overcome abundance and diversity of life? How to overcome distractions like Maya in cosmic world? Any takes from you?
Yeah, thank you so much. Basically, I was also referring to this towards the end of my brief talk that I have given. Bhagavad Gita tells us the simple principle, equanimity, samatha, where the abundance would be there, diversity would be there, but how do you treat this diversity and abundance is rooted in the individual self. So that's where the self-inquiry is required as Jayakumar ji is pointing out, as to what is minimalism to yourself is to be decided by you. Nobody else would decide it for you, and if somebody else decides it for you, you would always come up with a rationality, your own instrumental rationality, which would reject what others propose. So that is how your own rationality has to work out the minimalism for you. So in this process, obviously you are not rejecting the abundance, obviously you are not rejecting the diversity that is existent, but it only tells you how to deal with this abundance and how to deal with this diversity. So that's what is simplicity.
I think I should be, overstepping myself when Venerable Tulku is here. This idea is it is quite Buddhist also, because Buddha towards his end said, I cannot find a way. You'll have to discover your own way. It's quite Buddhist. So there is no one size fits for all. Distractions will always be there. And there is no harm in getting distracted a little bit, but only a little bit, to the extent we should. It's not a life of renunciation, to the extent possible. That is it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. We are now towards the closure of the program. As we can see that all of you are almost because I'm just trying to cross check if any question remains unanswered, because this beautiful title, all the queries about how to lead a simple life, you are going to get the beautiful insights by going through this title. And I'm just quickly going through. If you have any questions which remains unanswered through this platform, we would like to address them. We have Mrs. Shalaja Hadgal. This is perhaps the last question that we are taking for the session today. Mrs. Shalaja Hadgal may like to ask a question. Shalaja ji, could you please unmute yourself? I have unmuted you from this end. Mrs. Shalaja, could you please unmute yourself? On the right-hand side of your screen, there is an unmute icon, the mic. You just click onto it. I believe she is not able to do that. She's not able to do that, I think. Perhaps she's again has raised her hand, and she is, it seems, desperate to ask some question. Shalaja, you can post this question. We can quickly take that if you can write it. Otherwise, you may always can write to the author Shri K. Jayakumar ji on the email ID. Sir, with your permission, can we share your email ID?
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir.
No
Sir's
secrets.
email ID is k.jayakumar, k.jaya, jayakumar123@gmail.com. Sir has made it a very, very easy. He's trying to make your life much simpler. Even the email ID is too simple enough to remember. k.jayakumar123@gmail.com. You are most welcome to write to the author, to the distinguished author, if you want to get any kind of more further inputs from him about this book, and even otherwise how to lead a more simpler life. It's on behalf of DELNET, I take profound pleasure in thanking firstly the author Shri K. Jayakumar sir. Sir, thank you so much. And also because this has been the very first talk that we have done, and as Professor Bala has rightly pointed it out, this is the book talk series. Yes, the book has already spoken, and we had our distinguished author with us who has given us such a wonderful pleasure in organizing this program, the very first under the series, which we are going to really remember. And it was all because of also our distinguished panelists who deliberated. We are much thankful for the time and efforts that each one of you have devoted in going through the book. And we really are, sir, much grateful to you, Jayakumar sir, and also to each one of our panelists for making it a very, very wonderful evening wherein, and we could see that there are not many queries that our attendees may like to read this book. And we are reminded of a very beautiful words from Sir Francis Bacon, the famous English philosopher, who said, "Some books should be tasted, some devoured, but only a few should be chewed and digested thoroughly." All of us would agree that our author, distinguished author, Shri K. Jayakumarji, has given to each one of us such a soul-searching title that all of us would really like to go word by word and would try to, as our distinguished panel has also deliberated, that even while going through it, there have been lot many questions, the introspection, that everyone would really feel like asking their own selves, am I leading a complex life or a simple life, and how to make these complex into simpler. We, sir, on behalf of the panel and also on behalf of each of the attendees, sir, we would like to congratulate you for gifting such a wonderful, beautiful title to everyone. And we are pretty sure that this is going to really enhance the way that we treat life, and how the life treats us would definitely, there would be a new equation coming in for everyone who would really go through this title. So thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. We are indeed much grateful to our entire panelists who have really been very kind and gracious in going through the title, in giving and sharing their wonderful expertise, and also about their own insights into this book. We are indeed much honored and pleasured, to have the presence of each one of you, and for your time and efforts in being there with us. We are much grateful to each one of our attendees who really have made this entire session as a very engaging session and quite an enriching one. We had spoken about lot many things, and we really look forward, to having you back again in the future webinars of DELNET, and most importantly in the next book talk series. So do come forward, tell us what kind of titles that you would like us to take, and we would really be happy to have you back again in the same series. So once again, much grateful to each one of you.
I should also thank the panelists for taking their very valuable time off and spending nearly 2 hours on this particular book, to discussing this book, as well as for reading this book and contemplating about it. I am only not only flattered, I feel overwhelmed, as I said. At the moment, my mood is that I am looking for, as I have used in the book, countervailing forces by which I should not feel that I am a great author, There should be some countervailing forces coming from within me, which should prevent me from saying that, oh, look, I have become a great author. I don't have any such illusions. This is a book which I should have written. This is a natural book for me, because this is the kind of ideas which I always have espoused. So the COVID atmosphere gave only the right kind of setting by which I could put these things into writing. So thank you very much for joining us. Look forward to meeting you again and sharing more ideas in some other forum, and sooner than later. Probably we might be able to meet even in somewhere in Delhi. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Anand Kumar and
Thank you.
Sanjula
Thank
Sharma,
you,
and
sir.
of course for being the live wire connecting everybody. Thank you very much.
Nice, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, one and all. Much grateful. And thank you, each one of you. You have really made a difference with your presence today. We are much grateful to you. And we really look forward to seeing you back again. We are going to have a webinar. This is for the information of all our library and information science professionals. On 28th of this month, from 3 to 4 o'clock, we are going to have a webinar on best practices in knowledge management. We have our speaker joining in from Dr. Aditi Rao from Netherlands. We request you to remain, please kindly keep it the date and time block, 28th of August from 3 to 4 o'clock. Do kindly join us. Once again, thanking each one of you. Stay happy, stay blessed, stay contented, and do lead a simple life. Thank you very much. Thank you, one and all. Thank you. Thanks a ton. Also quickly to tell you, because there have been some posting about the certificates within 1 hour, that is sharp, not 1 hour, it's like sharp at 5:30, you are going to receive certificate of participation on your email IDs. So we once again thank you, and thank you one and all. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sanshla ji. Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Thank you, Tulku sir. Thank you very much. Thank you. Much thanks. Grateful, sir. Thank you.